Welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you could join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be a really good one.
It really is. So today we are exploring a framework that is honestly designed to help you map the moral structure of the media you consume every single day.
Right, the stuff you're scrolling through right now, probably.
Exactly. We are looking at a really fascinating, honestly radical paper by Lev Nemotin. It's titled MQ Toward a Moral Quotient. And our mission today is to understand this concept.
Which is a big mission.
It is, because it proposes creating a numerical instrument, much like IQ, but instead of intelligence, it's used to evaluate the moral quality of public behavior.
Right, which sounds intense, but it's handled with extreme care in the paper.
To really get why we might even need something like this, I want you to imagine a massive barrel of just sweet, pure honey.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now imagine someone drops a single tiny drop of toxic black tar right into it. You'd probably still eat the honey, right?
I mean, yeah, you can just scoop around that one little contaminated spot.
Right, but what happens when the proportions completely flip? Like, what happens when you are staring at a massive churning barrel of dark tar and there's only this tiny little trace of honey left?
And that honey is just completely drowning in the sludge.
Exactly. It's a really visceral image from the paper, but it perfectly sets the stakes. This isn't about judging people's souls or, building some dystopian social credit system.
No, definitely not.
It's about giving you a navigational tool to just protect your attention in a world that feels increasingly like a barrel of tar.
Yeah, and that visceral image really captures the fundamental breakdown of our modern information architecture.
How so?
Well, we've transitioned from this structural environment where impurities, the tar, were the exception,
Yeah.
to one where those impurities are basically the native fluid of public life now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to look at the mechanics of how that flip actually happened. I mean, older media like newspapers, broadcast television, it obviously had its flaws.
Oh, for sure. The paper explicitly mentions the yellow press.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect.
Right, but the crucial difference was friction. Think of the old media landscape like a municipal water treatment plant.
Okay, I like that analogy.
It wasn't always perfectly pure, but there were filters, right? There was editorial judgment, reputational risk, institutional gatekeeping. Even when you were reading the absolute trash, it was clearly labeled as such.
You knew you were in the tabloids now.
Exactly. The trace of tar was bounded. But today, the media environment is like drinking straight from a fire hose in a swamp. So my question is, does this new environment actually create bad behavior from scratch, or does it just selectively reward it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, social media democratized publication, which is great, but it completely removed those gatekeepers.
Right, the filters are gone.
Exactly. And the architecture that replaced them isn't just some neutral vacuum. Social media doesn't spontaneously generate evil out of thin air. It just alters the economics of expression.
Like lowering the cost to say whatever you want.
Yeah, it drastically lowers the cost of broadcasting while simultaneously amplifying what Nemotin calls the morally and cognitively combustible.
Wow. Cognitively combustible.
Right. So truth and decency aren't just naturally losing a fair fight. They are actively suppressed by an environment engineered to reward speed, emotional contagion, and relentless provocation. The algorithm artificially inflates the reach of provocation, so it raises the social reward for being awful.
So because the institutional editors are just gone, the burden of filtering that tar now falls entirely on you, the individual consumer.
Yeah, you're the one manually trying to sift the honey from the sludge every single time you open your feed.
Which is exhausting. And that is exactly where the concept of MQ steps in. It's proposed as an instrument to map the moral structure of what we are actually observing online.
Right, but we have to be very strict about defining what MQ actually is. It is strictly an evaluative framework for observable public behavior in the media sphere.
Observable being the key word there.
Exactly. It evaluates the patterns a person repeatedly enacts in public view. What expressed positions do they hold? How do they handle disagreement? How do they treat the truth when they're proven wrong?
And the paper is incredibly rigid about what MQ is not. I mean, it is not a measure of your inner worth or your soul.
No, not at all.
It's not an HR metric. It's not a state mandate. It's not censorship. It only measures the visible pattern through which the inner person becomes known to others. But I do have a major piece of pushback here.
Let's hear it.
If we are measuring public morality, whose morality are we using?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Because, I mean, Are we just inventing a new, highly subjective rulebook? One person's righteous moral crusade is another person's toxic harassment campaign?
Yeah, people have very different definitions of what is moral.
So if MQ relies on a moral standard, doesn't that just become a mathematical weapon for whatever ideology happens to be coding the app?
That is the immediate vulnerability of any moral framework,
Yeah.
right? And the paper addresses it head on. It argues that a valid MQ cannot invent morality.
Okay, so it can't be created from scratch by a bunch of tech bros in Silicon Valley.
Exactly. It must rely on inherited morality. The reference point has to be drawn from cross-civilizational deposits.
Wait, what does that mean? Cross-civilizational deposits?
It means looking at the religious, philosophical, and civic traditions that humanity has basically pressure tested over millennia.
Oh, I see. So we're essentially looking for the overlap in the Venn diagram of human civilizations.
Precisely. While specific traditions diverge wildly on, theology or cultural practices, there is a massive quantifiable convergence on core civilizational prohibitions.
Like the basic rules of being a decent human.
Yeah. Almost every major tradition universally condemns cruelty, deceit, needless violence, humiliation.
And taking delight in corruption.
Right. And conversely, they universally elevate honesty, restraint, fairness, and human dignity. So the standard for NQ isn't this unachievable absolute perfection. It's a practical, shared reference point built from those inherited baselines.
I buy that. I buy that there's a shared human baseline. But here's where it gets really interesting. Philosophies are entirely qualitative, right?
Right, they're abstract concepts.
So how do you force something as nuanced as human dignity into lines of code and an algorithmic output?
It sounds impossible at first.
It does, because right now, the way we judge people online is basically through digital mob rule. It's just chaotic tribal judgment.
Yeah, it's completely unmoored.
Structuring this into a measurable quotient like, literally making it numerical, seems like a wild attempt to sidestep that chaos. The paper makes the bold claim that MQ could eventually stand alongside IQ as a second numerical axis in a private filtering system.
And what's fascinating here is that a healthy information environment desperately needs to distinguish between cognitive power and moral quality.
Right, because IQ just measures cognitive processing speed, pattern recognition, logical sequencing.
Exactly. But someone can have an off-the-charts IQ, be incredibly articulate, and use that immense cognitive power entirely for manipulation, deceit, and cruelty.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, high IQ individuals with low moral quality are often the most effective spreaders of the tar. They know exactly how to game the system.
They do. So to separate the two, the paper breaks down the specific dimensions MQ would actually measure.
Think of it like a nutritional label for the content you're about to consume.
That's a perfect way to look at it. The first dimension on that label is truth orientation.
Which isn't just about whether a fact is right or wrong, is it?
No, it's about how the person reacts to reality. Like, do they publicly correct themselves when presented with contradictory evidence, or do they just treat truth as a disposable tool for winning an argument?
We see that all the time. Someone gets debunked and they just pivot or double down.
Exactly. The second dimension is fairness in representation.
Okay, so how they talk about their opponents.
Right. When they're discussing an opponent's viewpoint, are they describing that view honestly? Or are they just constructing a malicious, easily defeated caricature just to score cheap engagement points?
The classic straw man argument.
Exactly. Then there is the method of disagreement. Are they meeting substance with substance, or do they immediately default to mockery, slander, and just dehumanizing the person they're talking to?
Which is basically the default mode of social media right now. And the last one is moral asymmetry.
Yeah, does the individual apply their principles consistently, or do they only apply them tribally?
I want you to think about your own feed for a second. How often do you see a creator you follow eagerly excuse a vicious personal attack because it was aimed at a politician they hate?
Oh, constantly.
But then they turn around and cry harassment when the exact same tactic is used against their ally.
That is moral asymmetry in a nutshell.
MQ is designed to quantify that exact hypocrisy. But I gotta say, quantifying human behavior, putting an actual numerical score on fairness or truth orientation sounds incredibly reductive. It feels very cold.
I get that. The numerical aspect is what most people instantly recoil from. Numbers carry this huge risk of false certainty. But the real architectural value of quantification isn't perfection, it's explicitness.
By explicitness, do you mean we are finally forcing the algorithmic ecosystem to show its math?
Yes.
Like moving from a hidden black box to an open source ledger.
That is the exact mechanism.
Right.
Right now, hidden, opaque crowd-swarm judgments are dictating whose voices populate your feed. The engagement algorithm is already judging everyone.
But its criteria are completely secret.
Right, and it's optimizing only for attention retention. By defining criteria, truth orientation, fairness, dignity, and exposing the weights mathematically, you actually make the judgment visible.
So it's not replacing human judgment.
No, a numerical expression disciplines it. If hidden judgment becomes visible judgment, then you can debate it, audit it, and refine it.
But building an IQ for morality brings up terrifying risks of misuse. I mean, if we are going to use this instrument, how do we design it to avoid a literal dystopian nightmare?
It's the most critical question in the paper.
So what does this all mean for us? Because my mind immediately goes to the realization that voluntary systems have a habit of becoming mandatory by default.
They absolutely do.
If every bank, landlord, or employer starts quietly demanding to see your voluntary MQ app dashboard during a background check, isn't it functionally a compulsory social credit score?
This raises an important question, and modern jurisprudence is already recognizing this exact danger.
Like the EU laws.
Yes, the EU's AI Act explicitly prohibits certain forms of algorithmic social scoring tied to civic rights or access to services. And Namoten is adamant that MQ's legitimacy depends entirely on an architectural refusal to become a compulsory civic ranking system.
It cannot be used to enforce compliance, period.
Exactly. The paper actually details a conceptual app design in the appendix to show how this could work practically, and it addresses those exact structural vulnerabilities.
Okay, let's go through the design.
First, it relies strictly on public APIs.
So no peering into private messages?
None at all. It doesn't scrape secret records. It only analyzes what an individual voluntarily broadcasts on a public stage.
That's a crucial boundary. And it operates in distinct computational layers, right?
Yeah, to ensure that visibility you mentioned earlier. The foundation is the ingestion layer. It doesn't just scrape raw text. It gathers the public data while preserving the metadata context.
Meaning timestamps, thread structures, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It needs to know whether a post was a, quote, rebuttal, mocking an idea, or an earnest endorsement of it.
Which leads to the contextual interpretation layer. And the paper states this uses a hybrid of AI and human-readable rules. I need to understand the mechanics here, because how does a hybrid system prevent ideological drift?
Well, pure generative AI models inevitably drift because they learn from their training data.
Which, in this case, is the already polluted public sphere, the tar.
Right. An AI left to its own devices might slowly redefine sarcasm as hate speech or normalize cruelty just because it becomes statistically common online.
Okay, so why not just use hard-coded rules then?
Because pure hard-coded human rules are way too rigid to understand evolving slang or complex irony.
Ah, right. It wouldn't understand a meme.
Exactly. So the hybrid system uses AI strictly for syntactic parsing and context mapping, understanding the structure of the conversation. But the scoring matrix itself is constrained by hard-coded, human-readable baselines.
The ones drawn from those civilizational deposits we discussed earlier.
You got it. The AI maps the terrain, but the human rules determine the value.
That makes a lot of sense. It prevents the AI from moving the goalposts on what is moral.
Exactly. Then the data moves to the criterion scoring layer, which evaluates the specific dimensions, truth orientation, method of disagreement, and scores them.
And it doesn't just spit out one magical, opaque number.
No, it provides a dashboard where you can see the subcomponent scores.
I like that. It's transparent.
And crucially, this is all governed by the aggregation and confidence layer.
How does that work?
Well, if someone is only posted 3 times, the system assigns a near-zero confidence estimate. It explicitly refuses to pretend it knows their moral pattern based on 3 posts.
So it needs a large sample size.
Yes. The math requires a vast amount of public behavior over an extended period to yield a stable reading. MQ must evaluate long-term patterns, utilizing temporal smoothing.
Temporal smoothing. Meaning one terrible, highly emotional day doesn't permanently destroy an individual's evaluation.
Right. We all have bad days. And there's also an audit layer. If an MQ score is generated, the underlying data must be transparent and challengeable.
You have to be able to see exactly which specific public statements generated the metric.
And there must be a mechanism to contest it. No black box morality.
Which is huge. But my absolute favorite mechanism in the entire design is the slow mode.
Oh, the slow mode is a brilliant computational response to mob dynamics.
Tell them how it works.
Think about during a fast-moving, high-velocity controversy. Facts are murky, everyone is reacting emotionally, rumors are flying.
The classic Twitter pile-on.
Right. A standard algorithm accelerates during these cluster events because it drives engagement. The MQ app design does the exact opposite.
It hits the brakes.
It detects the high-velocity anomaly and pauses. It waits for context to settle, for corrections to be issued, and for the baseline reality to stabilize before evaluating anyone's behavior.
I love that. So bringing this all together, we have the philosophical baselines, the layered technical architecture, and the clear distinction from IQ.
Yeah, it's a very robust framework.
But how do you, the listener, actually use this in your day-to-day digital life? If it's not a state censorship tool and it's not an HR metric, what is its actual practical application?
It forces a really necessary distinction between censorship and self-protection, specifically how we govern our own attention.
Right.
Censorship is an external authority stating you may not speak. MQ, deployed as a voluntary navigational instrument, is the individual stating you are free to speak, but I do not have to invite every form of public conduct into my mental life on equal terms.
It is entirely about setting boundaries for your own cognitive real estate. I mean, think about it like walking down the street. You might naturally avoid walking through a neighborhood where people are just screaming at each other on the sidewalk, right?
Definitely.
Or you stop going to a restaurant that consistently serves contaminated food. In the same way, you can systematically choose to avoid a digital feed shaped by individuals whose observable behavior repeatedly degrades truth and dignity.
You are mathematically filtering out the tar.
Exactly.
And that's so important because the public sphere is a pedagogical environment. It teaches us what is normal.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When millions of people are algorithmically rewarded for being dishonest, cynical, and morally unserious, that behavior just becomes the new cultural baseline.
It normalizes the tar.
Yes. MQ offers a structured, explicit lens to help us demand better public behavior, at least within the boundaries of our own attention. It replaces passive consumption with active, value-based curation.
It really gives you the power to find the honey again without mistaking the sheer volume of the sludge for actual value.
Which is something we all desperately need.
Absolutely. But relying on an instrument like this as carefully as it's designed, it does leave us with a truly provocative structural question to ponder.
What's that?
Well, if we successfully adopt MQ as a highly effective personalized filtering instrument, do we run the risk of engineering the ultimate moral echo chamber?
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Think about it. If you perfectly filter out all public behavior that falls below your personal moral threshold, if you use the instrument to eliminate all the sarcasm, the tribalism, the messy, chaotic arguments, might you inadvertently isolate yourself from the exact people whose flawed communication styles are hiding genuinely necessary opposing perspectives?
Because sometimes the truth isn't polite.
Exactly. Sometimes a vital, uncomfortable truth is delivered poorly by someone who is angry and tribal. We want to filter the water, but if we sterilize it completely, we might forget how to swim in the river.
That is a fascinating tension.
It's definitely something to keep in mind as we navigate a barrel where the honey is drowning in the tar. The goal of mapping our moral structure isn't to pretend the tar doesn't exist. It's to give you the instrument to see it clearly so you don't spend your life swallowing the sludge and calling it nutrition.
Well said.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.